He woke up with a jolt, heart pounding in his chest. Not because he had a premonition that Rome was about to burn down or that the barbarians were at the gate, but because his lady complained he was snoring too loud. Gaius Valerius Catullus was the janitor of the apartment building owned by Flavius, one of the wealthiest men in Rome. This is the story of one of Rome's invisible citizens, a janitor. You can be a merchant, a prostitute, a gladiator, an emperor. The list goes on. But what if you want to do something a little more blue-collar? What job opportunities were there for the average Roman? Unfortunately, not many. In modern times, this job is mostly associated with schools and office buildings. Janitors keep these establishments clean and make sure everything is working properly. This could include cleaning bathrooms, emptying garbage, fixing leaky faucets, sweeping floors, and so on. With his small shack of an apartment, he couldn't imagine anything better. Sure, the pay wasn't great, but he had a roof over his head and food in his belly. Besides, he preferred cleaning and fixing things to whatever other job he could find. Toilets were a common fixture in public bathrooms, and because the urine wasn't cleaned, they tended to back up and overflow. For disposal, not everything was garbage, though. By midday, he is done with the general cleaning and has nothing left to do until his next shift in the evening. So he takes a long break to relax, eat, and drink. He sweeps the floor of the theater one last time, checks to make sure all the equipment is ready for tomorrow's show, then heads home for the night. As he walks, he thinks about how glad he is to live in Rome. He had his health, his family, and a job he was proud of. Plus, if he won the lottery, he could buy himself a villa on the coast and become a senator. A guy could dream, right? Back in the days before recycling, the Romans reused old materials whenever possible. Most people thought the emperors and senators were the ones who made Rome great. They may not be famous, but they're the real heroes of Rome. But the truth was, it was the everyday people, the farmers, merchants, and yes, even janitors, who kept Rome from falling apart. Without people to collect the garbage, fix the roads, and clean the toilets, Rome would quickly turn into a stinking, crumbling ruin. Broken statues and pottery were taken apart and used to make new things. Old clothes were cut up and used as rags, and the urine wasn't thrown away. It was saved and used for cleaning and other domestic purposes. Living here really was a privilege, even if it meant you had to watch out for wild dogs and broken sidewalks. He couldn't wait to see what tomorrow brought. Maybe he'd get to see a chariot race, or maybe a lion feeding. Or maybe he'd just get to watch the gladiators practice. Either way, Rome never disappointed. If you think about it, being a janitor in ancient Rome was probably a lot harder than it is now. Not only does he have to deal with vomit and human waste, but he also has to deal with animal waste. Dogs and other small animals like to use the privy as a bathroom too, and getting rid of their business was part of the job. While the word itself comes from the 18th century, the profession has existed since the beginning of civilization. The Roman world was an oligarchy, meaning the rich few controlled everything, and the poor many had very little opportunity to advance themselves. While they may have been responsible for cleaning, their main job was to guard the entrance to a building or compound. His son, Marcus, wants to be just like his father when he grows up. He likes the idea of being in charge and making sure everyone behaves. That made his wife laugh. Little Marcus was a handful and often caused trouble. Still, it was nice to see him so full of ambition. A freed slave was a former captive who was set free by his master. Being freed wasn't always a kind gesture. Masters would often free their slaves as a reward for years of dedicated service or as punishment for doing something wrong. Sometimes slaves could purchase their freedom with the money they earned while enslaved. Being a former slave wasn't the worst thing in Rome, but it did come with some social stigma. Freedmen were looked down upon by the upper classes, but they were still considered better than the non-citizens. Over time, the duties of janitors evolved, and they started doing other tasks like maintenance and repairs. They were stuck doing menial jobs, begging, stealing, or fighting in the Colosseum for their own or someone else's amusement. In exchange for keeping the building clean and fixing any broken fixtures, he and his family got to live rent-free in an apartment above the shops in the basement. The water needs to be refreshed, and the algae growing on the side needs to be scraped off. Then he tells Rufus to fix that broken statue of Cupid everyone keeps tripping over. Finally, he asks Marcus to clean the toilets in the public bathrooms, which is probably the most disgusting task in the whole building. It wasn't much, but it was enough. And besides, it came with the privy, and not having to walk barefoot across the city was worth its weight in gold. As he walks through the apartment complex, he greets people he knows and gives orders to the slaves who work under him. Like his master, he has several slaves that do menial tasks, but unlike his master, he treats them kindly. He knew better than to stay in bed. So he got up and went to the bathroom to splash some cold water on his face. It was the year 428. He took to work. He put on his tunic and sandals, ran downstairs to say goodbye to his wife and kids, then walked out into the bustling street, eager to start the day. Your days would consist of digging ditches, repairing roads, or moving large rocks around. It was hard, dirty work, but someone had to do it. Then again, if you were born a slave, your life wouldn't be much different. Laborers who were slaves usually lived slightly better lives than those who weren't free, but that didn't mean much. Slaves could be rented or sold to work in a variety of different professions. Slavery was the backbone of the Roman Empire, and without slaves, much of Rome simply wouldn't function. There are many ways to make money in ancient Rome. If you were lucky enough to be born a free Roman citizen, you might find yourself working as a laborer. But today, we're focusing on a unique profession, the janitor. In the ancient world, the word janitor simply meant doorkeeper. In ancient Rome, the job of a janitor was usually given to freed slaves. Catullus was a former slave who purchased his freedom. He starts his morning rounds, checking all the doors and windows to make sure they're locked. His first order is for Demetrius to take care of the fountain in the courtyard. Ancient Roman plumbing was one of the most advanced in the ancient world, but that doesn't mean it smelled good. As the morning progresses, he fixes a leaky pipe in one of the apartments, sweeps the entryway, and collects the garbage. Because of this, Cato spent a lot of time sorting through the trash. Sometimes he even took stuff home to fix or reuse. He spends his free time with his wife and kids, playing games and telling stories. After a nice lunch, it's back to work. The Eternal City is full of wonders, from its aqueducts to its roads to its public buildings. For a poor man like him, life wasn't easy, but it wasn't bad either. Rome was huge, and it took a lot of people to keep it running. So next time you're in Rome, take a moment to look around and appreciate the janitors who keep the city clean. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Thanks for watching.